we on? Okay. Good evening, and it is Saturday. Now, you usually see us on Sunday, and that's kind of weird for us, being on a different day. But so many things are weird right now. The fact that the federal government is actually doing something they could have done in 1971, and all of a sudden they're doing it now, is really weird. And I know you guys got some questions. That's what the chat is for. So let's get into it, and let's discuss rescheduling on the rotation. Okay, my name is Gary. So I'm your political director here at Suncoast NORML and our master of public health. We don't have our, yeah, we don't have the sound effects today, so we'll just have Kano clap for us, which is good. And in the upper left-hand corner, coming to us from above the Beltway, or he hits them below the Beltway, or somewhere near abouts Washington, D.C., our executive director, Christopher Kano. Chris, how are things over in the Beltway area?
Well, things in D.C. are pretty wild. Yesterday was May Day. You had workers demonstrating across the DMV. Of course, we have, some amazing news that we're going to be talking about in West Developing. You have budget fights going on back and forth, a lot of food fights between Democrats and Republicans. You just wrapped up legislative session in the state of Maryland and in Virginia, where there's advancements in cannabis, and there's, for every 2 steps forward, there's 1 step back. So a lot of things to talk about. So, but I'm glad that this is our first show back since our big fundraiser, the Best Blunt in the Bay 5. And that gives me an opportunity to introduce one of our judges and our communications director, resident IT geek, right above Gary in the square here, Katrina Pink. Katrina, the Best Blunt in the Bay. Just give us a few thoughts real quick, opening. What did you think about this year's festivities? So, I mean, you've been a part.
It was definitely a lot more challenging to judge. We had
And by the way, I love the Basquiat top you're wearing today. That's the artist of the guy who you have, who's the pattern.
Indeed. Chestnut Keith Aaron.
Thank you.
Now, before we just we bring up our new guest, I would give you a quick rundown as to what is going on right now. And it starts in 1970 when they created the Controlled Substance Act in order to reduce the amount of drugs being used in the United States in a proper way, supposedly, although it was actually Nixon's way of trying to get at the anti-war movement. The fact was, in that bill, they made it such that since they couldn't just figure out whether cannabis should be Schedule 1 or not, they gave it to the Attorney General to be the one who was going to make the decision whether or not what schedule it should be in, and they gave it up to him. And here it is, only 55 years later, and now we're finally getting a little bit of motion. Amazing speed from our legislature, don't you think, Chris?
I mean, yeah. Cannabis prohibition it actually goes back even farther. If you go back to the first Poison Control Acts of the early 20th century, I mean, in the first decade of the 20th, and you look at some of these states out west, like Utah and such, that were looking to criminalize cannabis all the way back in the early 1900s. Then you got the Cannabis Tax Act in 1937, or rather the Marijuana Tax Act. And then, once that was struck down in the summer of 69, you have, Congress and the Nixon administration coming back with a vengeance with the Controlled Substances Act. And the Schedule 1 status of cannabis in the Controlled Substances Act has been the biggest barrier to legalization, to research, to the cannabis industry. And I'm glad that we have a very special guest with us today who has been on the front lines for NORML, which as an organization has been around for over 50 years, fighting against cannabis prohibition since the Scheduling 1 status. NORML has been there from the beginning. And thank you to our founder and still Chief General Counsel, Keith Strop, for his vision and all that he continues to do. And because we have such an amazing organization supported by you all who are watching, you NORML members across the country, we're able to put great talent for us on the Hill to advocate for policy change. And so with that being said, Gary, if you want to introduce our guest today, we'll let him kind of give us an update of what has happened recently on the Hill with Congress and with the White House and what President Trump is doing in regards to cannabis.
See, what they have over in D.C. At NORML is a whole bunch of people who get involved. As you said, our chief counsel does all his work that he does, and we have a guy who's constantly going over to the Capitol and finding out what is going on behind the scenes. That is called our political director, and this is the guy who knows a lot of the inside baseball, and he probably can't tell us everything he knows because he might have to get killed afterwards, possibly.
Hopefully not, Gary.
Morgan Fox, it is great seeing you here again to give us the inside out and tell us what is going on. Now, we know that originally there was a executive order signed by Biden, the previous administration, to reschedule. What happened to that one?
So the long and short of it is that once that order was signed, Department of Health and Human Services issued a recommendation to move cannabis to Schedule 3. At that point, the DEA took up the issue and then opened up a public comment period. There were an overwhelming number of comments. I think it was in the tens of thousands that supported not only rescheduling, but also completely descheduling cannabis. At that point, it was assigned to an administrative law judge for a hearing. Witnesses were chosen and the case started moving forward. However, it was indefinitely postponed by that administrative law judge because of a lawsuit alleging collusion between the DEA and the witnesses for that hearing that were opposed to the proposed rule to move cannabis to Schedule 3. So at that point, it was postponed indefinitely. The administrative law judge decided to retire shortly thereafter, and then we were in limbo for more than a year. Fast forward to December when the president issued an executive order calling on the Department of Justice to move forward with Schedule 3 and initiate that process, as well as to allow certain cannabinoid medications, specifically CBD products, to be reimbursed through Medicare Medicaid system. There was no movement for several months on that. And then last week, we saw that the DOJ issue an order, or I'm sorry, just the week before last, DOJ issued an executive order to not only make state licensed medical cannabis products and FDA approved cannabinoid drugs Schedule 3, but also to recommence those hearings at the end of June, which I think could be a little bit difficult to do because they still have to assign a new administrative law judge and whatnot. But the end result being that right now, technically, any state licensed medical cannabis product is considered Schedule 3, and drugs like dronabinol and Epidiolex are also considered Schedule 3 as well. But quote unquote bulk cannabis and adult use products and any other products on the underground or illicit market are still considered Schedule 1. So I imagine that there's definitely going to be litigation about this because the ability for the DEA to just unilaterally declare certain specific products as Schedule 3 rests on a very specific provision in the Controlled Substances Act regarding treaty compliance with the various international anti-drug treaties that we have going on. And they have asserted that that gives them the right to be able to pick those specific products and unilaterally make them Schedule 3. I think that that is definitely going to be legally challenged, but I think that it's a pretty interesting legal argument that probably holds some water.
Now, I'm sorry. Federally, right now, cannabis is still listed as Schedule 1, although it's being changed, as you said, for those particular categories. And yet each state has their own particular schedule as well. Will they have to change all their laws on the state level to change it to Schedule 3? Because I know here in Florida, it's still listed as Schedule 1 in the Constitution.
So no, they won't have to change their individual state schedules, but there are a number of states that have what are called trigger laws, where if cannabis gets moved out of Schedule 1, then the state has to move it out of its different schedule. And there are some states that don't even have the scheduling system. So this, I think, is something that is definitely going to get adjudicated in the courts because it's kind of unclear because cannabis itself has not moved to Schedule 3 yet, just this specific carve out of certain products. And this has actually put us in a completely unprecedented situation where the exact same product could be a Schedule 1 substance in one state and a Schedule 3 substance in another state, solely dependent on what that state laws are and not what the actual substance is. Similarly, even within a single state, depending on whether or not the producer has an adult use license or a medical license, could determine whether or not that product is Schedule 1 or Schedule 3 within the exact same state. So I think that we're going to be walking into a realm of relative confusion over the next few months as these sort of things get hashed out. And then, there's also the fact that in order to be able to realize the 280E benefits of being a Schedule 3 substance producer as opposed to a Schedule 1 producer, you have to actually apply to the DEA. And from what I heard, they've been asking a lot of very, very interesting and probing questions, including whether or not that business is also involved in the adult use market, names, personal histories, identifying information about all of their employees, things like their security setups. And that's an awful lot of information to be giving the feds when it's still kind of unclear exactly where cannabis really stands on the schedule, as well as where the administration itself, or at least various departments and agencies, stand on this issue. One of the things that I thought was really interesting and somewhat telling that there's not really a consistent federal approach going on here is that very shortly after the Department of Justice issued its order to move forward in this way, we saw Solicitor General John Sauer send a memo to the Supreme Court basically saying that this new order from the Department of Justice does not impact the various cases that involve cannabis that are sitting before the Supreme Court right now, particularly the Hamani case, which relates to the ability for cannabis consumers to be able to own or purchase firearms. The fact that you have the Department of Justice writ large issuing this order regarding rescheduling, and then you also have the Solicitor General trying to hold on to whatever aspect of Schedule 1 they can in order to maintain the same sort of policy position and the same sort of discrimination against cannabis consumers, I think is really indicative of the fact that there is no consistent approach to cannabis coming from the federal government at this point.
Is there any immediate impact right now as of the time that the new acting attorney general signed it? Because I know that when it was signed back in December by POTUS, nothing happened at that point in time. It was given to Pam Bondi, one of our favorite attorney generals here in Florida, who was very, very anti-cannabis, and it basically sat on her desk along with the names of all of the Epstein litigants that she knows about, and it was not signed. It wasn't until now that it was signed that it came into effect. But is there any immediate effect?
Well, the DEA has opened up its portal for medical cannabis businesses to be able to apply for a DEA license. So things are definitely moving in that direction as if that were in full implementation. I think it remains to be seen how it rolls out. Again, I fully expect there to be litigation around this, so we'll see how far it progresses.
Well, that's something that I'm curious about, right? A lot of entrepreneurs who got into the cannabis industry probably have a lot of uncertainty right now. Obviously, there's a lot of optimism and a lot of enthusiasm over the progress we're seeing with Schedule 3 moving forward in a meaningful way. But what we've seen is that the established political institutions of this country that have benefited from prohibition continue to want to keep the status quo as long as they can in every which way that they can, which is one of the reasons why the rescheduling hearings under President Biden seem to be salted up. We saw the prohibitionist forces, doing everything they could to sabotage that case. And then the can got kicked down the road to the Trump administration. We saw the can kicked down the road for well over the first year of the term. Here we are almost, 18 months into the second term. And we still have to go through rescheduling hearings again. We're still going to see, like you said, these DEA license applications. And that's what gives me pause, because it feels like anytime that there's a licensing situation in this country, that can be weaponized against small business owners, right? The big weed companies, big cannabis could pay to get their license. You got these small business folks that operate in certain states that aren't multi-state operators. And what's the process going to be? Is it going to be too much bureaucracy? Is it going to cost them too much money? Because we're seeing that in Florida now. Morgan, what are your thoughts on the actual process? Like, as we see this getting legalized, being weaponized against everyday Americans who want to participate in the industry?
Well, I think we have to wait and see what happens. And again, the portal just opened up, so it's difficult to tell exactly what sort of speed we're going to see applications be approved. As far as I understand, there's not a whole lot of financial requirements for it. But I've been hearing people talking about certain analyses of the executive order and of the application process that might be related to production quotas and things like that, which potentially, if accurate, could preference this process towards larger operators. But again, I think that remains to be seen. And again, we might be facing litigation that could upend this entire process before even a single business gets its application approved. There's also the really weird, I guess, issue with related to treaty compliance, where technically all of these producers, once they get licensed, have to, on paper, sell their cannabis to the DEA, which will then sell it back to them, plus a fee, of course, in order for it to really, truly be considered a Schedule III substance.
Whoa. Run that by us one more time. Wow. What do you mean?
Sounds like taxation without representation to me.
I'm sorry, but who's going to buy?
Yeah, they called me for a loop. I'm like, what?
Wait, Morgan, did you just say people are going to have to buy their weed from the DEA? Is that what I just heard?
It's basically a pass-through system where they have to, producers have to sell their cannabis wholesale to the DEA, and then they immediately sell it back to them plus a fee. I know, it's completely ridiculous.
Well, it kind of reminds me of one episode of The Wire.
This is completely ridiculous. If you look at the way that this process is rolling out, it becomes just crystal clear that
Must gonna be that gas.
The schedule structure is completely political and not based on science, just like cannabis prohibition in its entirety. But also, the simplest solution is clearly to just remove cannabis from the schedule of controlled substances entirely, stop arresting people for it at the federal level, develop federal guidelines, and then allow states to determine their own policies within the context of those guidelines. It does not have to be this difficult.
So many people are thinking that there's going to be an immediate change.
Simple.
Automatically, all medical cannabis is automatically going to be Schedule III across the board, and yet we're looking at all the hurdles, especially in regards to getting a application through the DEA, which obviously they can't be done in 24 hours. I'm sure that's a long process in of itself. By the way, who has to actually apply for the DEA license? Is strictly the cultivators, the producers, the retailers, or in the case of the vertical folks, everybody gets screwed up?
I think that if you want the 280E tax break, anybody involved in the entire supply chain.
Because I'm fairly certain,
at least if you're plant touching.
I know I saw that Forbes article talking about the fact that our good old Kim Rivers over here of True Leaf was the cannabis whisperer that got it all started. But in fact, we know that she's been pushing very hard for the 280E, 208E to go through and save True Leaf a ton of money by allowing them to go ahead and make those deductions that they couldn't do before because of the 208E.
Well, now the 280E reforms are specifically limited to medical cannabis producers. I've been hearing about dual licensees who are thinking about just ditching their adult use licenses just so that they can get the tax breaks. So I think a lot of people are going to be reacting to this change in different ways. As of right now, though, I mean, it seems like there's more questions than answers.
Well, Morgan, that's an interesting point that you just brought up, because that was always a big fear of ours. In regards to what happened in Washington State, where everything just kind of went to like this adult use market, and the needs of medical patients get left behind. And now with it's kind of almost a reverse with this, is that if you're in the adult use industry and you want to take advantage of the tax breaks of being a legit business, you're going to have to ditch the adult use license and go back to medical. So, for the time being, it looks like the future of legalization is still remaining medical.
I would just clarify that it seems that people don't necessarily have to completely get rid of their adult use licenses, because the DEA asks questions on the application about whether you have a dual use license. So it's not necessarily a disqualifier, but that starts to get really interesting in terms of actually filing your taxes. You have to be very, very careful about bifurcating which of your products are on the medical side and which are on the adult use side. I mean, it's going to be a nightmare for tax collectors. But I do want to point out that in terms of the symbolic importance of this, of federal government admission that cannabis has medical value, and not only that, but also a recognition of legitimacy of state regulatory programs for medical cannabis, which I think is really the big exclamation point on this. This is really, really important. It's encouraging a lot of conversations in Congress and among policymakers in states where previously the folks in power had said that we're not even going to touch cannabis as long as it's Schedule 1, and now are saying, well, if the federal government's moving along on this, then maybe we can start to consider it, because it's obviously very popular with our voters. But so that excuse, that fallback position that cannabis is Schedule 1, we're not going to touch it, is slowly starting to erode now. And I am hopeful that we're going to see that pick up a lot more speed as the months progress, and we see exactly where this process is heading.
What my question is if you're a medical patient in a medical state, what change will you see from this action?
None whatsoever. It doesn't change any sort of federal criminalization. And I think it's going to be a long time before we see 280E fix actually trickle down to the consumer or the patient. So I think immediately there's really not too much direct practical impact that an individual patient's going to see from this.
Morgan, that's a good question. We talk about patients and they're not going to see much change at the moment. Obviously, there's a whole rescheduling process with administrative law hearings that need to happen. But for vast majority of consumers who are not medical patients, who use it in an adult use manner, what can they expect? Is it the status quo? I mean, folks may think, oh yeah, there's, because folks are not up to par on the political process in a lot of ways. They just see the news headlines. So there may be some people out there that think, oh yeah, Trump legalized it, and basically, can you go back and start smoking weed on a bench in DC in front of the White House?
No, you cannot. Cannabis, either licensed adult use or traditional legacy market, still Schedule 1. No change whatsoever.
I can't say that I once smoked on Pennsylvania and K. I'm not saying who I was with.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, though, because one of the things that we've kind of noticed just in terms of the general political bent of where things are going right now is that public consumption is becoming one of the biggest problem issues in this space. And it's causing all sorts of backlash, from the streets of New York City to the streets of Washington, D.C. We have folks right now that are trying to reverse decades of DC home rule because technically DC is not a state and Congress still has a significant amount of power over us. But for many years, DC has had some semblance of control over its own governance. And there are people in Congress right now that are trying to take that away. And one of the things that they always mention is that it smells like cannabis everywhere. And this is something that I've been hearing over and over and over again in every single state. And it's something that I think responsible cannabis consumers should really think about, because their actions have ramifications on good policy going forward. So if you can, keep it in your house, folks.
No, Morgan, you bring up a good point in that there is plenty of ammunition that prohibitionists will utilize against us, against the legalization movement, that each person will be held up as an example, and they're going to crack down and hit on as many bad examples that they can. And that's the shameful part about it all, because we have to continue to be stellar, upstanding citizens as cannabis consumers to point and say, look, being a cannabis consumer doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. And yet, for some reason, they want to, continuously demonize cannabis consumers. And I mean, the point that you just made about the smell, we've seen Governor DeSantis in Florida essentially use that as a political argument against adult use legalization.
Yeah,
I don't like the way it smells.
In Arizona right now, there's legislation that is quickly moving forward that would actually specifically criminalize being the cause of the smell of cannabis smoke if somebody else on separate private property can smell it consistently. And when private residence is the only place that you're actually legally allowed to consume cannabis, that starts to become a little bit problematic. Is it legal or is it not? An easy solution to this, or at least a partial solution to it, is allowing for social use lounges and public consumption lounges. But also, I think that this is something that, people are going to have to get a little bit used to, and as enough time goes on, as long as it's not wildly in everybody's faces, folks will start getting used to it, just like they get kind of used to like somebody smoking a big fat cigar on the street. They might not like it, but they're not freaking out about it.
Well, having smelled the streets of New Orleans on a Sunday morning after a big Saturday night, you yearn for the smell of terpenes. You really, really do.
True, but at the same time, I also think that I guess somewhat the novelty of legalization starts to wear off, people, and as more like social norms start to come into place, like they have for tobacco smoke, I think people will stop consuming in public as much. We're going to start to see that decrease, along with people being less freaked out by it, both because it's just not as new.
Well, people like smart approaches to marijuana. The good folks over at Smart Approaches to Marijuana, the SAM folks, they freak out easily in regards to cannabis is concerned. And our friend of the show, Kevin Sabet, who helps run the organization, they already screwed up the first attempt for rescheduling. Do they have any plans on screwing up this one too?
100%. They are already preparing lawsuits to challenge both the rules that went into effect immediately, based on the DOJ memo, as well as they will certainly be trying to take advantage of the ability to be witnesses in the hearing that's supposedly coming up at the end of June. And then when that hearing is over, and the Department of Justice actually does propose a rule and publish it in the Federal Register, then there's 30 days that people have to file legal challenges to that, which they will certainly take up on and are already fundraising off of. And those cases could take years. We've actually had precedent for that before, where some of these challenges have taken close to a decade to actually adjudicate, and it very rarely comes out in our favor.
Well, Morgan, you bring up an interesting point when we talk about SAM and Smart Approaches to Marijuana. They've actually drafted congressional legislation, the No Deductions for Marijuana Business Act, and they're essentially trying to negate any tax benefits that would happen under rescheduling. As you said, they're literally fundraising off of it. And so that's a good point to point out, is like you have this very small group of prohibitionists that have very minute public support, but they have tons of stakeholders that are dumping millions and millions of dollars into their organization. Meanwhile, we have NORML, a grassroots organization of cannabis consumers that's been around for half a century, and we literally depend on our network. So, Morgan, what do you say to the person watching out there right now? How can they support NORML and the great work that you're doing in D.C. so you can be their voice and their champ?
Well, always contacting your lawmakers is a great way to do it. But yeah, financial support is definitely what we need at this point. Last I checked, I think that the biggest prohibitionist groups out there are sitting on $24 million war chests. And that is so far much more than what pretty much all of the anti-prohibition organizations combined have to bring to the table. It's just really important that everybody gets out there. But talking to your lawmakers is always important. Making sure that they know where you stand on this issue, making sure that you're a polite pain in the butt, is a great way to at least make sure that they don't forget this issue and are not so easy to minimize it or deprioritize it when it does come up. It's interesting that you were mentioning that that no deductions for cannabis businesses bill. It doesn't look like it's really going anywhere at this point. However, one of the interesting things that I saw very recently was that in appropriations, all the legislation that's meant to fund the federal government, it's broken up into a bunch of different bills that are based on very specific funding lanes. And in the one that funds commerce, justice, science, and related agencies, we just saw the subcommittee that's in charge of that approve a draft bill that includes a provision that reserves rescheduling solely to Congress. Congress always has had the ability to change the schedule of controlled substances as much as it likes because the CSA is legislation, or at least it was based on legislation. The DOJ is able to do certain things as well, and the current process right now is what we're looking at. Congress could do it tomorrow by passing something like the MORE Act, which immediately removes cannabis from the schedule of controlled substances entirely. But we have seen the majority leaders in this subcommittee continue to put forward language that would prevent the descheduling process as ordered by the president and reserve that power specifically for members of Congress. The fact that Republicans are the ones pushing this language right now that would go directly against what the president has ordered and has honestly been talking about in a way as if it's a really big policy win is frankly mind-boggling to me, but it is happening. Luckily, we haven't seen that sort of language on the Senate side in recent years, but I am concerned that through the appropriations process, not only has some of the progress that we have made so far, such as restricting the protections for medical cannabis businesses, will get passed, but we'll also potentially see interference in the rescheduling process, which would, at least for the time being, put all of the onus on Congress, and it's very difficult to move any legislation through Congress right now.
I keep on wondering if Dana Rohrabacher were still here today, would that things would be different? Because he seemed to have gotten a little bit more inertia than we see nowadays.
Well, I mean, the political environment is quite a bit different now than it was then. And we also see things being quite a bit more hyper-partisan. But honestly, one of the big things that I see over and over again is that cannabis is being deprioritized across the board. So, to see the president actually prioritizing it, at least for the moment, and then to see members of the majority party in the House actively fighting against that, it creates a very strange social dynamic where it really depends on the exact lawmaker that you're talking to, what sort of an answer you're going to get about whether or not this could move or whether or not we're going to continue to see obstructionism. And I think it's going to be changing week to week. It does not make my job very easy.
No, I get you there, Morgan. I mean, there is definitely a lot to be said about the political maneuverings. I mean, you've seen stakeholder prohibitionists and their donors, salt up the administrative process. Then you have, the Justice Department slow walking the president's executive order. Now we have members of Congress sneaking in language into the budget to essentially subvert the president's power to reschedule. And they're members of his own party. So every which way, cannabis consumers are often seem to be an afterthought in all of this. And yet somehow we all live rent free in these prohibitionist minds. So there's a lot of work to do. I know that you do a lot of great work, Morgan, and creating action alerts across the country where folks can take action, whether it's sending an email to their member of Congress or President Trump or even to their local legislature. Why don't you just tell folks a little bit about how they can go to NORML.org and what they can do to take action today?
Well, just going to NORML.org/act, you can find out all the ways that you can contact your lawmakers, whether that be at the state or federal level. We do try to keep up to date as much as possible with any sort of substantive local issues as well. But also, if anybody has any of these issues coming up in their state or in their locality, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to hear more information about what's going on the ground as much as possible, beyond what we're able to scrape up given our relatively limited resources. I would also encourage everybody to check out decriminalizenow.org. That is a coalition of folks that are every year going up to the Capitol and doing a big push with members of Congress and anybody that will give us the time of day to talk to them about cannabis policy reform, with a specific focus on descheduling cannabis and repairing the harms that it's done and freeing cannabis prisoners. So if justice is what you're interested in for this particular issue, this is a great way that you can potentially get involved. There's ways both in DC as well as at home, and any support that you can provide to that effort is greatly appreciated as well. But yeah, I mean, throughout the year, just that $4.20 a month really goes a long way towards NORML's ability to get work done.
Indeed. And now, real quick, you mentioned decriminalizenow.org. That is directs folks to a website that is part of the coalition between NORML, the Last Prisoner Project, Students for a Sensible Drug Policy. There are tons of organizations across the country that are actually going to be coming to Congress in a few weeks, as a matter of fact. Was it May 13th, if I'm not mistaken? Correct, Morgan?
That's right.
Yep. And so visit, check it out, learn more about what you can do at decriminalizenow.org. And Morgan, why don't you just tell folks how they can get in touch with you and NORML to get involved?
Oh, you can just reach me at morgan@norml.org. My door is always open. If I can't answer a question for you, I'll be able to point you in the right direction at least.
Great. I got one last question for you before you go. With rescheduling, who do you expect will gain the most? Will it be the multi-state organizations? Will it be the individual state dispensaries, or the patient, or
lawyers?
Lawyer. Well said, Morgan. Well, thanks for the update on the Hill and joining us, from DC. We appreciate all the hard work that you continue to do, all the great work that you and the staff at NORML continue to do. That's why y'all got a shout out from Afro Man on the Because I Got Hired Positive Vibes remix. And thank you for everything, Morgan. We truly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me again. Appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Well, with that, Gary, I mean, there's a lot of news going around. I'm glad we got that live update from DC from Morgan. But let's go ahead and jump into the NORML news. So as we jump into NORML news, just following up on what we were just talking about on today's show, the Justice Department has moved to federally reschedule state-approved medical cannabis products. This is, looking at reclassifying cannabis from a Schedule I substance under the Controlled Substances Act to Schedule III by an order that was issued by the acting U.S. Attorney General Todd Blanche. And it states that marijuana in any form covered by a state medical marijuana license to be placed in Schedule III of the Controlled Substances Act. This is a historical reversal of federal cannabis policy. It validates the experience that tens of millions of Americans are having, in that there are tens of thousands of physicians that see those folks who've long recognized that cannabis possesses legitimate medical utility. And it's the legitimacy of these longstanding medical cannabis programs, going all the way back to the first ones in California in the 90s, that are available now in a majority of U.S. states, even in the District of Columbia. And the issue with all of this continues to be that there are folks out there who have made a lot of money over the past 100 years or so of criminalizing cannabis, of making sure that we have one of the largest prison populations on the planet, and that simple possession carries heavy penalties and fines, even to the point where you don't even have to have an ounce of weed on you to get a felony in the state of Florida. And so we see a lot of progress happening at the state level in other states in regards to this. Some breaking news coming out of Massachusetts. The Massachusetts governor, Maura Healey, has signed legislation, House Bill 5350, into law that raises their marijuana possession limits for adults and makes other state level policy changes. It basically doubles the amount of cannabis that you can possess for adult use, for recreational legal use in the state of Massachusetts, from 1 ounce to 2 ounce. And you may also legally possess in public and even give to one another. So basically, you can gift a friend up to 2 ounces of weed now in Massachusetts. But this new law also establishes rules for businesses seeking to allow on-site consumption. It eases the vertical integration restrictions for medical cannabis businesses, and it restructures the state's cannabis commission, among some of the other changes, and decriminalizes possession of 3 ounces up from 2 ounces from those 21 and older. So if you have up to 3 ounces on you, you could just get a ticket and you won't get a penalty. And you can legally possess 2 ounces to purchase or gift to another person or have on you in public. So Massachusetts is making a lot of headway in regards to, adult use and a cannabis consumer centric policy. Now, let's look at some other developments. In the state of Virginia, lawmakers have rejected the governor's amendments for marijuana sales bills. Lawmakers in Virginia passed a structure that allows an adult use system in the state of Virginia. Governor Abigail Spanberger came back with amendments because under Virginia law, the governor can actually write their own amendments on a bill that gets passed. And her amendments would repeal multiple provisions of the state's decriminalization and legalization laws. It would reinstitute steep criminal penalties for public consumption, and it would automatically revoke driver's licenses of young people who possess marijuana. And the governor also sought with this amendment to delay the start date for retail cannabis sales from January 1st, 2027 to July 1st, 2027. And the lawmakers, through the great work of Virginia NORML, shout out to J.M. Padini, who has done amazing work there and serves as the development director for National NORML's offices and as executive director of Virginia NORML, of lobbying lawmakers, building a coalition, and getting to push back on these bad amendments from the governor. So kudos to JM and Virginia NORML for making that happen and making sure that lawmakers address that. Now, all's not necessarily the greatest thing in the world. In Mississippi, lawmakers have failed to override the governor's veto of the medical marijuana expansion bill. Governor Tate Reeves of Mississippi vetoed 2 bills that sought to expand patient access to medical cannabis. Republican Governor, as I said, Tate Reeves vetoed House Bill 1152, which would have provided physicians with greater discretion in recommending medical cannabis to their patients. Qualifying symptoms remains something that we struggle to address even in the state of Florida. And then House Bill 895 sought to extend the validity period of a practitioner's medical cannabis recommendation and remove THC potency caps on certain cannabis tinctures and other concentrates. And both bills passed by significant margins, but they didn't have the supermajorities they needed to override the governor's veto. Elections matter. Who sits in an office matters, and having enough allies in your state legislature matters. And that is some of the issues that we're seeing in the grand scheme of things when it comes across the entire country right now. So as we look at local elections coming up in the city of Tampa, as we look at the county elections that are going to be happening this year in 2026. We look at the state legislature, whether that's your state senate. We saw a special election just recently in March for Tampa, which we had to get the senator-elect on here, who's now been sworn in as senator in the state of Florida. Brian Nathan, shout out to the new senator from Tampa. We need more allies in office. Elections matter. If you know of solid folks in your local area, there's some great work that NORML's doing online. You can visit norml.org and visit Smoke the Vote. And of course, fill in for your member of Congress or your state senator or your state representative and let NORML know who is the right folks in your state on cannabis policy and who are the wrong ones, because people need to know. And we're going to continue to give you great guests each and every week here in the rotation and make sure that we have vetting the right candidates, that we're putting the right folks in office, and they're doing what we can to support. So, Gary, what are your thoughts on the NORML news, brother?
I got to tell you, it's jarring to see 55 years of federal prohibition like that kind of suddenly get totally screwed up. But I am interested in seeing how the big pharma is going to make hay of this. I also find it interesting that they say it's a possibility with the 280E and everything else that there might be possibly ability of interstate commerce in regards to one DEA licensed facility transferring product to another DEA facility, which means that you could have one cultivation that could send to 7 different states if they're contracting with 7 different states, whereas right now everybody has to grow it, process it, and do it in their own states.
Well, the criminalization of cannabis is something that we've exported out of America across the world. And there are American states, in particular Hawaii, who have had lawmakers look at, well, can they be a hub for export and exporting American cannabis products, obviously to the Pacific market and even all the North and South American countries on the Pacific coast as well. That's an interesting point to think about. I saw that in recent news coming out of Puerto Rico, they have the largest medical cannabis market in the Caribbean right now. And so America produces ridiculous amounts of cannabis. It's one of the reasons why, that brick Mexican cartel weed, the Reggie Bush, as folks have said for many years, just doesn't have the same effect that good homegrown, made in America boutique cannabis has. The problem that we have is the entry of large multi-state operators and corporate players into the market who have never been cannabis growers at heart. They tend to have been folks that have already been part of big ag and part of the agricultural industry and framework for a long time. And they're now just trying to expand and diversify their revenue streams. And we see them cutting corners, whether it's spraying with certain pesticides, herbicides, fungicides that are not conducive to the healing process for sick patients. And that's a major concern. And I think truth in labeling moving forward is going to be one of the most important consumer policies that we fight for in this market as things start to become more open and as we legalize. Gary, what are your thoughts on that, man? Because you're someone who smoked weed that was sprayed with paraquat by the U.S. government back in the day. So the impact of having bad stuff sprayed on your bud.
Absolutely. And the impacts can be long-reaching and far-reaching. So people have to really consider about what small movements they make that actually matter far down the road. And that includes the fact that we have people who are making products here in the state of Florida that if they have moldy grow, they will ignore it or they will burn that stuff and turn it into oil and sell it off in their overpriced carts. And we have one particular friend of the show right now who happened to have an Instagram anonymous post where he had gotten information from one of the dispensaries, one of the MMTC's cultivation folks who saw that and recorded it himself as to how much mold and how much intrusive products we're being involved in. And when he gave it to a friend of ours to go ahead and broadcast on Instagram, suddenly our friend is being sued by that same MMTC for broadcasting what one of their own employees saw at their own facility.
Well, speaking of getting sued, I saw Matt the Welder, who's running for Florida Commissioner of Agriculture against Wilton Simpson in the Republican primary, posted a video of a recent clips coming out of the facility in Jefferson County that True Leaf grows at. And they were discharging the water from that grow, and it was causing environmental impacts that don't seem to be positive. I'm going to avoid any type of legal language that would get us in trouble because they already got people who are blowing the whistle on this getting sued. But this brings an amazing point for consumers is that what are they spraying on your medicine that if they discharge it into the environment, it's environmentally impactful? Like that says a lot. And for every single Forbes cover that a cannabis CEO might have, these small stories that come out on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, definitely point to business practices that don't put workers first, that they don't put the brand first. They definitely are not putting the people consuming it first. And that is something that I have spoken out about well over a decade. I said it in our opening speech when we rolled out our chapter of Suncoast NORML at a Florida Cannabis Coalition event. I said, look, you don't deserve to make 1 red cent in this industry if you don't put patients first. And sadly, that is what we are seeing. You feel it, right? You say it all the time when you go into a dispensary or MMTC. The experience as a consumer and talking to a bud tender, it feels like they just get the basic training, and they're talking about a checklist of things. You know, they ask you the most basic questions, and then they try to plug you into this framework of products that are not tri-traded to what you want. I mean, it's like, hey, I want something that is organic, that is full spectrum, that is going to be beneficial to me. And you just get someone who's like, yeah, you want to get high? This one's got this X amount of THC. And one of the recent things in the NORML newsletter this week was inflated THC levels across the country on labeling, and people basically getting, paying top shelf prices for mids. I mean, that's a damn shame, but that's what big cannabis is doing to us right now.
Yeah, I don't think people even know how to read a label, to be honest with you. Once I started actually reading the labels to find out how old the product is, because it's usually in code on the front. But if you look for the last 2 digits of the year, you can usually take a look at the digits just before that and figure out when it was harvested, when it was produced, or if you can pull up their certificate of authenticity and find out exactly when it was, because they have no problem with giving you product that is a year old, that's been sitting on the shelf for a long time. And that's not curing time, my friends. There is a difference between curing time and just sitting in a plastic bin without any kind of humidifier to maintain it. It eventually turns into straw. Yeah. And so you have to get what you pay for. And I'll grant you, they are doing some discounts for older products, which is kind of nice. But they need to tell you you're spending less money because you're buying much more shitty product.
Well, that's there's a lot to be said about where the industry is. One of the things that has bothered me over the years has been the amount of plastic waste that we see coming out of the cannabis industry, and that's a concern too. Like, I would prefer to get my stuff in a glass jar, not plastic. Microplastics in our bodies, in our environment, continue to be a health hazard, and cutting down on that every which way makes a big difference. So there's that issue around it. There's the issue of just the amount of single-use plastics that's going into it. A lot of the way they built a bureaucracy and to make hurdles to the cannabis industry is sad, right? It doesn't make any sense. A lot of the ways that all the different product labeling, the plain white plastic jars, if we really wanted a patient-centric system, you would be able to get bud without having it sit in plastic, without having your bud sit on the shelf for almost a year. You would be able to get access to your medicine, and you would have qualified, customer service experiences where you could ask questions, where they could help you titrate. Even then, physician education and having a doctor who's well educated on the matter and has been through the training program and is on the latest on the endocannabinoid system and how it affects other things. Like it is such a multifaceted just barriers to a solid experience as a cannabis consumer and as a sick patient in this country, that where do you turn for answers? And that's where NORML comes in at. I mean, we have great articles. You go to norml.org and you can learn more about, how cannabis is consistently coming out with the latest research of how it's affecting and helping sick patients. And you can connect with your local NORML chapter to find advocates and people who have been through it and who can share with you their own experiences. And of course, you become a member of Suncoast NORML. And being a member of our chapter makes all the difference in the world, because as a member of Suncoast NORML, you're able to be a part of this fight on the front lines. You're able to support the great work that people like Gary do by going up to Tallahassee and engaging with local government and supporting us. There's the great work that they're doing at the national office at NORML. You can follow them and find out more of everything that's happening with NORML. But we really need folks that take action to get off the couch. And it's just as easy as getting on your cell phone and sending an email to your legislators and letting them know how you feel and what's important. But if you want to know the latest on research, if you want to know what to do in your neck of the woods, if you want to start a NORML chapter because there isn't one near you, go to norml.org, find out more of how you can get involved and how you can help. And of course, become a member of our chapter. Go to suncoastnormal.org.
You mentioned research a few seconds ago. Yeah. And when the new acting AG went ahead and announced the rescheduling, he said, we'll finally be able to start doing good research on the effects, on the negative effects of cannabis. And I just love the fact that he mentioned that, because that's exactly what they've been doing for the last 55 years, is strictly doing research on what possible downside there was. Nothing in regards to the benefits. And that's been a big issue in regards to research. It's not just the research, it's what you're actually researching and what you're actually looking for, that it is so important. And if you want to fund the more proper research, that's where we come into, because I guarantee you we're going to be pushing to get the better research done, more research into proof of with stuff with autism, like my good friend Leahy Barlev Schneider is doing over in Israel in regards to autism and other things that really have to be researched because they're so important.
Yeah, the interactions of modern cancer drugs and modern cardiac drugs with cannabis is important research that we need to know about. You have one of the interesting topics we talked about in recent weeks is the impact GLP-1s that these Ozempic and Wegovy and other weight loss drugs that people are utilizing, and how that affects their cannabis consumption. Because some people take edibles to help them with chronic pain or to help them with anxiety. And as you slow the absorption, how does that interaction affect what you do and how it's going to affect your body? There's a lot to be said and a lot more research to do. But the one thing that does strike me is when prohibitionists or politicians with a lack of fortitude or political will fall back on the research argument and say, we need to do more research. And it's like, no, there's like 18,000 cannabis studies that you can go on PubMed right now and look at. There's thousands of studies that get done each and every year in regards to cannabis. The research is getting done. And then even moving it from Schedule 1, we'll see more research be available and actually research grants in the academic industrial complex being able to take a crack at that research without it being taboo. I mean, if you think about what Dr. Sue Sisley was trying to do originally, and how they killed her research program, and she had to go to another university, and she had to travel across the country to get grants to do the research on veteran suicide in cannabis. I mean, there's a lot to be said about the progress that's happening, and there's a lot that needs to get done in regards to research, but we can't do that without support. We need folks to continue to join, hit that like and subscribe button. But of course, we have great events too, right? I mean, we just had our biggest fundraiser of the year, the Best Blunt in the Bay, going down 420 weekend. And it was amazing to send Chillum St. Pete's location out with a bang and to have so many great folks there. And for folks who couldn't join and weren't there, I just want to play some recaps and some highlights of the event. So for those of you who maybe want to join in next year and become a judge, like Katrina has been for the past 3 years, or to become a contestant. And the Dabathon this year, I mean, that was wow. And why don't we just let the footage tell it?
1, 2, 3 o'clock, the torch is out. 4, 5, 6, and the terp sauce drops. 7, 8, 9 in the crowd. Our Glocks at the Best Blunt Dabathon around the clock. We're gonna dab around the clock tonight. Gonna dab, dab, dab till broad daylight. If the label says hemp, then the vibes are right. We're gonna dab around the clock tonight. Down in the bay where the judges grin. Everybody talks like they're bound to win. One boy coughed and he spun half round, then bowed to a folding chair like it wore a crown. We're gonna dab around the clock tonight. Clouds so thick you could dim the light. If it's farm bill blessed and we sleep just right, we're gonna dab around the clock.
So,
that song was that event, wasn't it?
Yeah. Shout out to NORML Chair Joe Bondi for commissioning that song for the Best Blunt in the Bay 5. We appreciate Joe. That was an amazing event. Just to see so many great past champs and rollers returning to be part of the contest. This year's contest was quite elite because we had folks I think we only had two contestants who were rookie entries. Typically, we have a lot more rookies, first-time rollers, but these were master-level rollers to begin with, even though it was their first time participating. And then we have master-level rollers. We had past champs participating. I really enjoyed it. Watching a 40-minute Dabathon was quite interesting and fun, too, just to see, folks going head-to-head, who is going to be the last person standing in the Dabathon. But I want to roll a clip of some of the entries, because you saw folks rolling, you saw folks doing dabs, you saw the champ go home, new champion Samson this year going home with the belt. But I'm gonna roll another clip for y'all that'll show some of the entries and saw what these champs were rolling, whether it was a tulip, whether it was a triple barrel shotgun joint or a Suncoast NORML joint. There were some amazing blunts that got rolled in the competition. We're just going to show that one more time.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, the torch is out. 4, 5, 6, and the terp sauce drops. 7, 8, 9 in the crowd. Our box at the best blunt dabathon around the clock. We're gonna dab around the clock tonight. Gonna dab, dab, dab till broad daylight. If the label says hemp, then the vibes are right. We're gonna dab around the clock tonight. Down in the bay where the judges grin. Everybody talks like they're bound to win. One boy coughed and he spun half round, then bowed to a folding chair like it wore a crown. We're gonna dab around the clock tonight. Clouds so thick you can dim the light. If this farm bill blessed and we sleep just right, we're gonna dab around the clock tonight. Susie brought a rig with the glitter top. Said this one's legal, baby, watch me mop. She took one.
I saw a glass filter there. That guy bring his own, or did you have him out there?
No, so in the freestyle round, Carlos, let anybody go through the shop and get whatever rolling materials that they wanted. So in the freestyle round, we saw some really cool stuff, whether it was glass tips, whether it was folks rolling 3 joints into one. One person used rose petals to roll a tulip, as you saw from those entries. So it was a lot of fun. And, being this our 5th year doing the best blunt in the Bay, folks had a lot of fun, a lot of great times. So, of course, as always, when they come around every spring, sign up, be a part of it. We put on a great time, and folks really enjoyed it. So now, Gary, we got some amazing guests coming up that you got coming down the pipeline here in the rotation. I know next week is Mother's Day, so we're going to be taking off. But the following week, why don't you tell us a little bit about the special guests you got lined up for us?
Okay, coming up in mid-May, we got Dr. Peter Greenspoon, who's the son of the amazing Dr. Lester Greenspoon, who was an amazing doctor and researcher in cannabis. And he's going to talk to us about his research in regards to the use of cannabis for seniors and also for reduction of opioid addiction, which is so important. And one thing that Ashley Mooney definitely left on the table when I tried to get her to put together an organization that would actually seriously consider opioid reduction, and it wasn't done, because that's one of the things we definitely need to get fixed. And we know that cannabis is one of the treatments that can be done, and we're going to get his take on that and move forward. And we got a lot of candidates. Now, I'll grant you, the districts kind of shifted in Florida just recently. In some cases, like for instance, the guy who is running in my district in Hernando County now has a district which extends all the way into Hillsborough County, which used to be Kathy Castor's votes, who had been in that office for about 10 years. So they've diluted one district and bring it to another one. They've made red districts purple, essentially. But the fact is that's going to make things so confusing. So if you think you know who your candidate is, you may be wrong. You may have to go ahead and check to see who your candidate actually is. But we do have candidates for Congress and for state and legislature, and also for local positions as well. And we're going to see also the guy who's running for Attorney General, JJR, as we affectionately call him. We will have the gubernatorial candidates on as well. So you will get a chance to find out exactly who these folks are and possibly perhaps what their opinion is on cannabis. So looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, Gary, thanks for all the great work that you've done this legislative session in Tallahassee. I had the opportunity this week to attend bill signings, in Maryland. One of the great bills that NORML helped pass and I got a chance to chime in on in my role in the labor movement was, of course, making sure that firefighters and first responders have access off duty to medical cannabis, and they can't lose their jobs for testing positive for THC. And that is a multi-year fight that we've seen happen. And shout out to Governor Wes Moore for signing that into law. Shout out to Senator Lamb for carrying the bill in the Senate. And shout out to all the sponsors in the House, Delegate Buafu, who's also running for Congress in the state of Maryland, and all the great, amazing chairs, Chair Janelle Wilkins, and all those the great folks in the Maryland General Assembly who helped push this over the top and who have carried on the fight throughout the years to make this happen. Oftentimes you get discouraged because you see multi-year fights. And Gary, I can tell you the multi-year fight that we have in Florida around workplace protections for cannabis consumers is right on track. Maryland is a triple blue state, all run by Democrats, just like Florida is a triple red state, all run by Republicans. And I can tell you it is a matter of political will, not political ideology, when folks address and move forward on, consumer-centric cannabis policy. And you just got to keep pushing. And so we got over the finish line in Maryland this year, and we're going to continue to fight here in Florida and do what we got to do. So Gary, thank you for all the hard work. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Follow us on social media. You can check us out on Instagram or follow us on YouTube and Facebook. And of course, visit NORML.org to learn more about what you've got going on. Visit suncoastnormal.org, become a member. Also, shout out to medical marijuana awareness webinars in the spring lineup. There's some great webinars each and every week that you can tune in and watch for free. Visit our website, suncoastnormal.org. Check them out. And of course, as always, make sure that you vote to legalize it. Gary, have a good one, brother. Catch you next week.
Absolutely. I started this in my 50s. Hopefully I won't finish it in my 70s, but we'll see.
Hey, smoke weed every day.